The Ed Trust is extremely excited to have with us today Florida State Senator Shevrin Jones. Shevrin, we know that you have done such an amazing job in advocacy as well as driving impact around some of these, forcefully against some of these anti-equity bills and the anti-equity agenda that is coming out of the Florida government right now. And I wanted to level set with you and get you to explain to us exactly what this type of legislation means, not only on the P to 12 side, but also to higher ed, and what advocates can do within your state and outside of it to stop some of the aggressive bills that we're seeing come forth. But
Yeah.
to get started, Shevrin, I just want to go ahead and ask you, what exactly is happening in Florida? We've seen the headlines. What is happening in the classrooms? What does this mean for AP African American history?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm happy, so happy that we're having this discussion and to be here in this space today. I think we have to understand the history of how we got here. 2018, after the death of George Floyd, there was a nationwide effect that took place where not just Black people, but people from all across this country, corporations and everything, make it clear that there is an injustice that exists within this country. And people started moving into the conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But there was a research that I read that said this was also the most times that the word systemic racism was used. And because of that word and because of the changes that were being made, yeah, those in power said, no, that cannot happen because they didn't want their white children to be able to be moved into this idea of what it meant and how we got here. Fast forward to now, you had Donald Trump, who went after DEI first. You have Ron DeSantis filed HB1 after the death of George Floyd to determine how we can and cannot protest. And then they went to Don't Say Gay. And now we're at the rejection of AP African American Studies. So it's a trend that's happening, one, because we see there's a group of people who see the shifting of America. And then the second thing is it's a power struggle that we're dealing with. They know that they're in power in Florida. And because they know that they're in power, they're going to do any and everything to maintain that power. It's not about policy. It's definitely not about people. It's about power and how to maintain it. They don't care who they hurt. They don't care who dies from it, because obviously they don't. And last but not least, yeah, if you disagree with them, you're punished for it.
Shevrin, what impact does this have? So I love that you brought in the historical aspect because we know that the huge shifts in policy that seem to come about at the same time or quickly in tandem with the George Floyd protest. There was a push, an anti-equity push that
Right.
seemed to come after so many businesses invested in trying to have more diversity and equity. And that has been, quite frankly, one of the saddest things to come out of what started as a very strong movement. Many people on the right specifically pushing against that.
Right.
But in the classroom, we know that across multiple states, there just has not been a robust African American history as it stood long before some of the initiatives out of Florida. So to now have African American history, AP African American history pulled out or to have it restructured and to see some of the other devastating effects of the anti-woke agenda, what does that mean for students?
Well, if not checked, we have these type of policy have the ability to see an entire generation raised black children who won't ever know who they are within the same education that they're learning in. That's the potential and the effect that this could have. Because we also need to realize that this is not new. We've seen this before. We've seen this in other countries of the banning of books. We've seen this in telling teachers what they can and cannot say, telling parents what they can and cannot do, and putting it all in the names of parental rights and religious freedom. Is why they're using those words. They use those words because they believe that the common person, it resonates with them. Of course, parental rights. Yes, I do want to make sure I maintain those rights of my child. But on the other side of that, we find ourselves with the rejection of AP African American Studies. We find the parental rights in education, or colloquially known as Don't Say Gay. You get these type of policies for multiple and different reasons. And the last thing is these buzzwords that's being used: indoctrination, woke. It's not by accident that Florida is not the only state that's using these words. You go to Texas, they're talking about grooming children and indoctrination and woke. I mean, but we know what woke is, because we've come from a time where back in the 1930s, when the first time it was written as being used, was a buzzword to Blacks to let them know that there are policies that exist that are against us. And then we heard it again in 2014, and when those same type of policies was coming to hold us down, we said, let's stay woke. And so now they're using it against us. And I said, no, woke is the new N word to me, because y'all gonna dehumanize the word so much to where you dehumanize us and don't make us feel as if we even matter in our own state and within our own country, which has us right now having to legitimize ourselves all over again.
And that's a really good point, because we do see that the word woke in many instances at this point has not only been taken from the activists and the civil rights groups, but is now being used it's being weaponized against them. It's being used as something that is supposed to be scaring or making white students, white families feel ashamed of who they are if we tell the truth about American history, if we tell the truth about the democracy that we stand under.
Right.
I think that one of your comments really drove this question for me around parental rights. Parents' rights has been a huge buzzword across Florida and the 20 other states that are seemingly working towards passing similar legislation. When we say parents' rights, they typically mean, or that it has been known to mean, suburban moms, i.e. white moms, white families. But those aren't the only people whose kids are in these public schools. Why isn't parents' rights also including diverse students, which make up the largest group of public school students?
Right. Well, I think we also, to that same point, we have to understand why education is the breeding ground for all of this. I mean, the education is the breeding ground of all of this is because it is the greatest equalizer, and is the easiest place where you can have access to someone's mind, especially if I start at a young age. It's not by accident, though, that they are also talking about in the teaching of LGBTQ history, or using race. I mean, using the banning of books and all those things there, and they starting at a grade level where they are directed by teachers. And even if my policy in these states don't match the rhetoric, I have placed enough fear in teachers and in parents and others to where now I'm even scared to teach African American studies. I'm scared to put a picture of my partner on my desk because I don't know what I want to do, whether there's a policy for it or not. Now I don't want to be caught up I don't want to be caught up in somebody else's narrative and their ideology.
True, and you're driving this home a lot here, because one of the things that I look at from the Education Trust standpoint, where we are trying to, advocate for students of color particularly, but students from low-income backgrounds and students who are in these areas where diversity and equity are quite often challenged, is that we also want to advocate for their communities and the teachers who are serving them. In Florida, you have an environment that has been created by the government that now looks like teachers themselves are kind of stuck in the middle. They don't know what they can and cannot do. There is repercussions from teaching American history, and common things like many of the speeches from Martin Luther King Jr., like the history of Malcolm X, like the conversations around social justice movements, where we know that's by and large how Black people got a lot of the rights that they actively have in this country today, because we fought for those. What does it mean when teachers themselves are afraid, one, for their jobs, but also other repercussions related to what they can and cannot teach in the classroom?
It's muzzling, and that is the epitome of indoctrination. And it's crazy because there's this hypocritical back and forth that's happening, because it's we don't want you indoctrinating our children, and then in the same breath you're telling what the individuals can and cannot say, taking words out that can't be in curriculums and things of that nature. It's double talking that's happening. It's dangerous, and outside of it being dangerous, I think we all can agree that it's wrong. And there are even Republicans who believe that they know that this is wrong. But we go back to what I said in the beginning. It's not about any of that. Forget the policy. It's the power that is trying to be maintained, and whether it's power in policy or power in mind.
How are teachers and advocates trying to combat this? What are you seeing on the ground?
I think teachers, to answer to continue on your question, your last question, teachers are pushing back by they're saying, listen, yeah, I'm going to teach it anyway, and fire me. And some of them are doing it, but teachers are pushing back. You also have teachers who are joining together across the state, across states, to push back on a lot of these policies. And so you're going to see that, and the advocates are out there, but I believe, but the biggest group that people are dependent on, but they won't be the ones to save this issue, is politicians. Because if y'all are waiting for politicians to come save to change this, it ain't gonna happen. This is going to be a groundswell that's going to have to happen to change what we see in right now. I think we're starting to see it, because I think we live in a generation to where millennials and Gen Zers, we've learned about this. History has taught us about this. We ain't going back there.
How can non-Floridians help you in this fight?
Yeah, I think non-Floridians, they have to understand that you next. Because if it could happen in Florida, it's coming to Texas, it's coming to Tennessee, it's going to Arizona, it's coming. Utah, you name it, it's coming. It's just Florida is the petri dish to what is about to go across the country. And they're testing it. You see, not only are they testing the policies, they're testing the courts with it. Because we have a conservative court, and other conservative courts use us as a precedent. And now what you start doing, you start creating policies that go to or precedents that go to the Supreme Court. And we have what we have now, Roe versus Wade.
We've seen the Stop Woke Act. It got a lot of media attention. It has been challenged by the courts. To something that you spoke to earlier, obviously these anti-equity bills and policies are happening in other states. It's not just happening in Florida. With that being said, what is the impact on DEI, specifically at the four-year university or college level, and how are you working towards that as well? We know that there's a lot going on at the P-12 level as it relates to the agenda in Florida, but those tactics and those issues are also affecting universities. How do you go about that level of action?
Well, removing DEI or trying to alter DEI at colleges and universities is going to be very tricky for many of these institutions, because there are federal dollars that are tied to a lot of those DEI initiatives at colleges and universities. And not only dollars, it's more than just talking about race. Or whatever they believe is tied to it. It's more than that. You deal with your veterans in DEI. You deal with single moms in DEI. You deal with the American with Disabilities Act within DEI. So you start messing with a few different things, and I think there's enough noise that's happening with this that you can see them backing off from that conversation, because it will put a lot of institutions in tough places. Now in Florida, I don't think the governor too much care about that, because you have I just heard one institution is going to have to fire 115 people within their department because of this move. So it's dangerous, and I think they're going to see this backfire on them with a lot of this extremism that we're seeing.
And I could not have this conversation with you or any Florida legislator without talking about the Don't Say Gay bill. Yeah. Which is demonstratively, I think, one of the worst legislative efforts that we've seen in a very long time, because of what we know, what has been recently revealed in research about young kids, specifically students who are LGBT students, right, who are experiencing heightened levels of depression, anxiety, and suicide related to not being seen as human, related to not having their rights or their personhood upheld, and right, how these types of bills affect their daily lives. What is being done on the ground for that as well, and pushing against the Don't Say Gay agenda, but also in protecting these students who, quite frankly, are under attack? Yeah,
there's been a lot of groups that have come into Florida to help with mental health counseling and counseling in general, and a lot of the centers around the state. I know they do it in Orlando. I know they do it in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, in those areas. So you have people who have put philanthropic dollars behind a lot of those subtle things that that needs to happen. As far as government is concerned, I mean, not in Florida, we won't see in Florida any type of support that will come from the legislature in protecting our most vulnerable youth, and that's our LGBTQ youth. Right now in Florida, they much rather tells gay students that they can't go to Christian private schools, and or they're shutting down drag brunches and all these things. They rather do that type of stuff than ensure that they are truly representing the 22 million people who live in the state of Florida. And by mind you, many of those other individuals who you're marginalizing against, you call yourself their representative, and so you see people fighting back. I think you see a lot of you also see a lot of efforts where voter registration drives are taking place and voter initiatives are taking place to get ready for the next 4 years and the really next 2 years, because everyone know we're stuck right now because in the legislature, the Republicans are in both the House and in the Senate with super majorities. And so right now, no procedural, no logistical things can be done. So most of it is, you know what, it's ground game. Is coming back home, going into the community, going to events and seeing all of these as opportunities to engage people. It's people think it's a voting problem. Yeah, maybe, but it's really an engagement problem that we're dealing with now. How do you get people back engaged to let them know that this deals with you? Your pocketbook is tied to this.
Absolutely. And as somebody who went to elementary school and middle school in the great state of Florida, 3rd through 8th grade, Santa Rosa and Escambia County specifically, I can say that one of my really close friends in 7th grade, he came out and he was not only attacked, bullied relentlessly at school. The school didn't really have, I think, many of the equipment that they needed in terms of how to support him that is available today. But sadly, that young man ended his life. He ran in front of a coming train, and that lives with me till this day. Seeing this young man who I was in class with every single day, one of the nicest kids you could ever meet, who just did not have any place else to turn and had a system that wasn't necessarily built to and did not really try to support him while he was being excessively bullied. When we see a governmental structure that decides that being woke means that we are going to push towards removing the basic needs, removing the basic areas in which we can support students who are transitioning, students who are making that very tough decision of coming out, students who are just being bullied for a variety of reasons. It becomes very difficult to stand behind and watch. So at the national level, as you know, Education Trust National looks out on states like Florida, like Texas, several states across the country, and we're seeing these things happen. We're always working with partners and trying to figure out strategically what are some of the best ways we can help support you. The people closest to the problem are the people within the states, but at the national level, we want to figure out from you and get that information, that feedback flow going. What can people do who are not in Florida to support your advocacy efforts, to help to bridge that gap between what is horrendously happening at the policy level there and making sure that we are keeping students safe?
Yeah, I think if I could speak from the trust perspective, and the work that you all are already doing, and I know you will continue to do, is looking at, I mean, even researching how and what communities can be doing in this moment, and how they can build coalition and building these coalitions that turns into political movements. I think that would be something that will go well with anyone, because I think the knowledge of that, and it should be passed down to elected officials. And even, I mean, the Education Trust and the work that you all doing work with elected officials, if possible, to train in how to get in their communities and how to engage people, how to build coalitions within their community to make your area a political movement. I think people can, from the philanthropic aspect, given to organizations that are doing civic engagement work, given to organizations that are doing like the teaching of Black history that will kind of push back on these policies. This is like a true village that's going to have to happen. That if the government work with the private sector and the private sector work with the public sector and other nonprofits and others, I think we can create this cycle to end what we're seeing right now. But I just don't think a lot of people understand how to do it. Last week, last weekend, we had every quarter I do a thing called We the People University. And it is people go on Eventbrite, they pick their class they want to take, and they go to their classes on Saturday. It's teaching them about how to do good business with the state, how to build coalitions in your community. These are the type of things that we're going to have to do to re-engage people. And we can do this nationally. People can contribute to that. And I think we can start seeing change. It's going to take time, though.
Absolutely. I would also ask you, when it comes to these book bans, we see everything from Ta-Nehisi Coates books to some of our literary canon books from Maya Angelou. These books have all come under fire, and a lot of them have, quite frankly, been removed from access for a lot of students. How does that translate into what students are actually going to be able to understand about themselves and their world? And I say this beyond solely Black students, because I think in this context, a lot of people assume that this is for Black students. The idea is that, people who don't grow up in this experience will also fully understand that this is where our nation was. And in many, many ways, due to systemic racism, due to the things that we have not changed as much as we should have going into 2023 and beyond. What does it mean to have those types of books not be able to be read by young people?
First of all, I think we got to understand kids are not dumb. These kids, they're not dumb. And in this political climate, the individuals who are trying to, or who are banning books, they think that these kids are not going to find this out. You actually just probably going to frustrate them for lying to them. They have information at the palm of their hand, so you're not hiding anything. The horror in banning these type of books, like Martin Luther King and the 15 Letters in the Birmingham Jail and Maya Angelou, and let's just keep going down the road, it's dangerous for the generation who it represents, the people it represents. And so it's up to us to preserve it, and preserving it in a real way to where we ensure that our children never forget these individuals. Because every other culture have a way to trace back where they come from, how they got here. And all we got is a ship with names that you have a record of some. And last but not least, we already weren't teaching the right history, even in our books. Because a lot of times, in these books, they believe our Black history started at slavery, and it didn't. Yeah, our history actually started in a land where we were building pyramids, making gold. And so that's what children have to understand. Just like they have their culture and they know that history, we deserve to do the same.
And it also helps us to understand where we are. There's a firm belief that we don't understand where we're going unless we understand where we've been. And for an America that was built on the backs of slaves, one that has propagated segregation, one that has, for the longest, provided means to stop or prevent Black people from voting and what that means. One that consistently has, perpetuated ideals of redlining and all of these other issues that have come out of basically dehumanizing Black people, making Black people second-class citizens. Those aren't necessarily things that have disappeared over time. And to your point, it's not as though young people aren't going to see these things anyway. We all saw the Tyree Nichols video. We all have seen time and time again, not only police brutality, but how Black family homes are devalued in comparison to white family homes. There's a lot of there that's regularly on television, and that we can, just go on Twitter and find out on our own without necessarily having the classroom support. But I do believe there's something to be said about instruction that allows you to explore, that allows you to understand the world around you, the world that you happen to be in, and the world beyond where you live. And it's very hurtful to watch what's going on in Florida and several other places when it comes to these book bans, because it has a real effect on our democracy.
That's right. And it's going to have long-lasting effects. But here's the thing I need everyone to understand: the pendulum always swings. It's taking a little bit longer than usual, but it swings, and it swings back towards right. It has to. Yeah, because they're just like we have a breaking point, the universe have a breaking point also, to where it's only you only gonna get so far. Like mom and dad used to say, you only gonna do so much before I spank you.
Senator Shevrin Jones, if you had marching orders that you could give out to advocates, to civic groups, to research and policy organizations on how to achieve some of the gains that we need to ensure that students are learning what they need to learn, that the honest history is taught, that equity is being showcased in schools, both P to 12 and higher ed, what would those marching orders be?
What do you want history to say about you when this is all said and done? That's it. Because that goes to every segment that you just made mention of. You might not be a politician, but you could be a writer. You might not be a marcher, but you could do an op-ed or something. You might not, we all have a lane to be in. And all of our lanes will lead us to where we need to go. And we are fine when we are working together. Find that niche and how you can get in the fight and make it work. And build that coalition with every segment that will be able to lead us on. I mean, those people who think you feel like you're out there on your own, you only feel like that when you think you're doing it alone. But build the coalitions. That's the time that we have the time to do it right now. It might look bad. It may even get worse, but things always get better.
And you're a freedom fighter. You are a freedom fighter in a state where sometimes it is that freedom march is taking a little while. It's right. Very hard. What inspires you?
My niece, my nephews, and my family, but mostly my niece and my nephews. That's I saw my mom and my dad, how hard they worked for me to have a life that I have now. And I look at my niece and my nephews right now, and my partner and I we are very adamant about continuing to raise queens and kings in this family. And so that's my agenda.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. I'm excited for the work that you're doing in Florida. I know there is a February 28th action event coming up. Yes. Learned about it via social media. Are you going to be there? And is there any information that you can give us about that strong advocacy event?
I will be there. I don't have information, but what I will do is I will make sure I send it over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Appreciate you.